Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Public Safety and Health and Human Services Joint Committee this morning. I'm very pleased to be joined by the chair of the Health and Human Services Committee, Vice President Albernaz. I'm going to turn to him in a second, but this is the fourth work session that we have had, the Public Safety Committee has had on Bill 4520. This is the fourth. And at the last one, Vice President Albernaz suggested that because we're dealing with so many mental health issues and issues associated with mental health issues, that he thought that it would make sense, and it does, to have a joint committee meeting this morning, if at all possible. And I know that the Health and Human Services Committee has not followed everything that we have done from the Public Safety Committee on this Bill 4520. But if it's at all possible, I would like to give a recommendation to the council, full council this morning, if possible. And with that, and I'm going to turn to I guess Ms. Wellens, who wrote this packet and did a wonderful job doing that and trying to figure out what we did and didn't do. But with that, I'm going to turn to Vice President Albernaz, and then we're going to begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've really enjoyed our conversation and discussions regarding this specific bill. As we've all noted, falls in line with our collective goal as a community to ensure the transparency and the public safety for all of our residents, and that everyone feels that they're receiving the same information and being treated the same way. And I really found the discussion around how we track information and data around mental health calls important, because in real time, our wonderful colleagues are working as we speak on devising policies and practices and procedures in coordination with law enforcement and the Department of Health and Human Services on how and when and where to dispatch our crisis response teams with, again, the collective goal of minimizing use of force, but also, just as importantly, ensuring the follow-up and follow-through as these cases are brought to our attention. And as recently as this weekend, I received information from two of our local hospitals regarding the significant and stark rise in mental health cases that they are seeing in their emergency rooms. And unfortunately, many of which are rising to a violent level, to the point where additional security has had to be asked for within emergency rooms to address the kinds of cases that our hospitals are seeing. And that tracks with what we have been noted and what the Department of Health and Human Services has been briefing on, which is a rise in cases that are requiring clinical care. And we have a challenge at the state level, just as a sidebar, a significant one. There weren't enough beds prior to the pandemic, and there are certainly not enough now. And the other troubling trend is that we're starting to see more young people that are requiring this level of care as well. So that, with that as a backdrop, and as we develop and institute the policies and practices on how exactly to respond to these calls, while the calls that are rising, and ensuring that they're done effectively and humanely and with the best of intentions and with a holistic perspective that takes into account what we know are best practices, that's really critically important. And as we do that, we need to figure out how we track this information statistically and from a data standpoint. So that was the reason why we got back together among these two really awesome committees. And our discussion today will be exclusively limited to that topic. And so I agree with you, Mr. Chairman. I have every degree of confidence that we're going to get through today's discussion, and I'm hopeful land in a place that will allow us to make a recommendation on this one outstanding element, because as I recall, we have voted on all the other elements of the bill. This is just one of the outstanding measures that we all agreed collectively we needed to come back to. So assuming we can do that, I think it would be more than appropriate for us to advance this to full council for the broader discussion. But those are my 2 cents and a little bit of context and background. And I appreciate you, Mr. Chairman, in accommodating everyone's schedules. And once again, thank the team for putting together a really robust and helpful packet that will walk us through.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. President Hucker.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief. I know there's people probably tuning into this work session that didn't tune into the previous ones we held in the Public Safety Committee. It's great to hear those comments from the chair of the powerful HHS committee. I want to just thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Councilmember Jawando and the Council Vice President and OLO for getting us this far on this bill. I think I'm proud to be co-lead sponsor with all of you, and I think this is a really great thing that is going to go a long way to increase the community's trust in our police, and I think it's really good for not just the community, but for the police as well, because public officials know this as well. It's very hard to reply to anecdotes and hearsay. And when you're collecting data, and we all want to make our policy based on data and not just anecdotes, I'm sure no police officer wants to be in a position where you're just seeing comments and anecdotes on social media that are not backed up by facts. And I know every police officer I have talked to, proud of how they do their jobs. They rely on their relationships with the community. They rely on their ability to get witnesses to come forward and cooperate. They work hard to do the right thing. I'm sure they do not want an administrative mistake or any failure to collect data on traffic stops or anything else to create a cloud over the department and their individual hard work every single day. None of us can improve policing without better data collection. This bill is going to do this. If you're just tuning in now, we've had 3 work sessions in the Public Safety Committee, so I'm grateful to you, Mr. Chairman, for all your diligence on this, because I want the public to really realize this shows how seriously we take community policing and data-driven policymaking, and this bill is Exhibit A. So I'm grateful to Councilmember Jawando and the Council Vice President as well for all their hard work that went into this, because I'm excited about moving this bill to the full council. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other committee members before we actually ask Ms. Wellens to lead us through? I did want to welcome Dr. Raymond Kroll from HHS and Assistant Chief Darren Frank from the Police Department. And I know there are others on this call as well, but I see no hands up. So with that, I'm going to ask Ms. Wellens, if you could lead us through the packet and sort of quickly give the synopsis of what we did for the first one, the second one, the third one. So as the President Hucker mentioned, those who are just tuning in, so to quote Councilmember Jawando, rather than be the 1 million people watching at home, it would be 1,000,003 people watching at home, to remind everyone of what we've done, and then get to the part that we're going to be discussing today. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, and good morning, council members, Dr. Kroll and AC Frank. So as you stated, Mr. Chair, this is the 4th work session on Bill 4520. This bill originally stemmed from a report of OLO, which recommended various practices for the police department to gather data and share data publicly in order to enhance community policing. And the way that the bill is structured, there are essentially kind of 2 categories of 2 big baskets of information. One is information that will be collected and published annually and shared with the county executive and county council, and not only them, of course, to the public as well. And the other big kind of tranche of information is types of information that will be gathered in a more real-time basis and that will be published through Data Montgomery, will be published online for the public to access whenever they wish. At the first couple work sessions, the Public Safety Committee worked through a number of amendments to fine-tune the legislation on a couple of different fronts. Importantly, when this bill started, we were in the last General Assembly session, and there were some important changes that were being made related to police transparency and accountability. And so part of the amendments were to pair up the council bill to the new state legislation to make sure that they were consistent. There were also task force recommendations that the committee wanted to make sure were included. There were a number of community advocates who had recommendations, some of which were overlapping to the task force, some of which were new. So the committee really plowed through many different suggestions and considerations. And then, as you stated, Mr. Chair, where we are today is that with regard to service calls, specifically for mental health issues, homelessness, and substance abuse issues, the committee needed the expertise of Dr. Kroll and his team and the HHS committee to figure out, with regard to the annual data, essentially what types of outcome data should be collected and published, what data will be most useful and make the most sense internally in terms of those types of calls, like who responds to the calls, et cetera. And then regarding the data that's posted online, the question was related to what types of demographic information should be collected pertaining to those types of substance abuse, mental health, and homelessness calls. So to look at the first issue first, council staff and the police department met with Dr. Kroll and Dr. Santiago regarding this first issue that you'll see, issue number 1 in the staff memorandum concerning annual data on the service calls. Excuse me. And so the question was, with regard to these calls, we had some community advocates say that the type of data that should be collected regarding them should be who responded to the call, was the subject detained, issued a citation, arrested, was force used, was referral made, and that type of information, although very well may be the type of information that should be collected and might be very useful. What council staff discovered based upon the input from DHHS is that it really might be premature actually to go into that level of specificity in the bill of what precisely should be collected related to these types of service calls, primarily because DHHS is in the process of working with consultants on this very same issue. And so they've been working with the Whiteberg Clinic that's run the Constitutes program for over 30 years. And they will be able to provide DHHS with a lot more feedback of what is really useful for the county to be collecting regarding these calls. So the proposed amendment for the committee's consideration is that we would provide some flexibility, and you'll see this on page 6 of the staff memorandum is the suggested amendment. And the idea is that the director of the Department of Health and Human Services would be the one to flesh out the types of the specific types of information that we need regarding those calls. So you'll see for each type of call, the police department would report annually on, among other things, data in the manner prescribed by the director of the Department of Health and Human Services regarding the number of calls for service involving substance abuse, the responses to those calls, and the outcomes of those calls. So a DHHS would, based on its knowledge of best practices and working with its consultant, would really drill down into what precisely is going to be collected. So that's the first issue, is whether to adopt amendments to provide that flexibility for DHHS to determine the specific parameters of what data we're collecting on those types of calls.
Thank you. Dr. Kroll, do you have any timeline when you would be getting the consultant's information? Do you have any idea?
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. I should start with that. You're right. Yeah.
All right, it's fine.
Yeah.
I think Dr. Santiago could probably give us an exact sense of the date and time around when we expect the White Bird Clinic report to be done. But my memory of this is that it is by the end of this year, by December, sometime in December, we should get that result, those reports. And I would just add that for us is the starting point of being able to identify what data recommendations they have that we might make. But then the other piece of this is looking at the sum total of the data and coming up with a set of recommendations that will be useful data, not just numbers for the sake of reporting numbers, but data that will allow us to improve and strengthen our outreach, community outreach response.
Okay. Commander, Chief Frank, it's, these titles always get confusing to me. Chief Frank, do you have any thoughts on this suggested amendment?
I'm going to say I really appreciate the role that HHS wants to take in this, and I really agree with finding data that's going to help us, that's going to go towards an end to help us better our process. I will say in addition to that, the flexibility of the doctor to tell us the kind of data they need to form better products, better services. One of the things we're going through right now is this RMS process. We're procuring our new records management system, which my goal for the department, Chief Jones's goal, is to make it a incredibly useful one-stop tool for officers in our county for everything we need as far as data. And by getting more information from the Cahoots people, getting more information from HHS, and having flexibility there, it'll help us to build this product, which we want to implement in the next 18 to 24 months. My big concern with any of this is, how do we get the best data? I have no problem with giving data. It's just getting the best data. How do we go about doing that without offending the people we interact with on the street, without having to go to multiple systems to pull data and then kind of put it together and say, this is our best guesstimate. I'm really into precise data, and I think this amendment will help us to get to a better place that we have actionable information.
Okay. Anyone else want to comment on this suggested amendment? Councilmember Chwando.
Yeah, good morning. Great to be with everybody. I just, Dr. Kroll, just following up on what you just said, obviously your intent, I'm asking this question, but I would assume your intent would be to be consistent with the rest of the bill, which pulls out race and ethnicity and all the various demographics, in addition to, who was, what issue anyone was dealing with, how it was resolved. That would be part of your process, correct?
Yeah, I think that, well, it sounds to me like the data around race and ethnicity is already wired and baked into the bill, and that of course would be part of how we would be looking at the data as well. My concern, what I was asked to think about, was how do we deal with the behavioral health elements of that: homelessness, mental illness, substance abuse. And my goal is to be consistent with the bill, but at the same time to figure out how we get the best data and the most useful data around those three elements. So it will be an integrated approach to that, absolutely.
Wonderful. Thank you. That was my only question. Thank you.
Thank you. Council Vice President Albernaz, I think you just told me you would like to speak. Yes, Councilman Vice President Albernaz.
No, absolutely. So thank you. Just, I totally support the amendment. I think it makes a lot of sense. I have a great deal of faith that the Department of Health and Human Services is going to, once they receive this information, be able to fully implement a state of statistics that are going to be helpful, both in organizing. I just sort of, as I alluded to in my opening comments, in real time, we are discussing from a policy perspective, and that's not what we're formally talking about this morning, but it's connected. But regarding how we are aligning policies and practices as calls come in and determining how those calls will be responded to. We have, the great news is implemented the expanded crisis management teams. We now have more staff that is on the horizon that we're going to be making sure comes on board. But if either Dr. Kroll or Assistant Chief Frank can talk about how those conversations, in addition to wanting the better framework as recommended by Cahoots, there's also the matter of who's actually tracking this information, who's inputting it. And that obviously is very relevant as well, in addition to the categories. If either of you could talk a little bit about that, that would be helpful as well.
So, Chief, you can start or I can start. Okay, thanks. So I can.
You're a doctor.
Yeah,
That's right.
oh, wow, yeah. Which title is there? Okay, go ahead.
That just means I get to go under the bus first. Is that
Right?
It's a good question. I think those for me, those things are inextricably linked. The information that we get from Cahoots about the data we get. Let me back up and say that the data we get is going to be wholly dependent on how we train folks, who's answering the questions, how it's being collected, and when it's being collected. The work of Cahoots was purpose designed to give us some guidance around how we triage calls as they come in the door. So how do we distinguish between something that is something that requires a law enforcement response versus something that can require it can be done solo without law enforcement by a mental health team or an outreach team from our homeless outreach programs, or some other program in HHS that might do a first response, such as PYD or Street Outreach Network. The challenge then is going to be, how does that data inform that process? Because the truth is, we've got people who are making those calls. You can't tell when a call comes in always. There's a person acting erratically on the street, sounds like a mental health call, but maybe a substance abuse call. There's a person who's high on the streets, may also have a mental health call, and may also be homeless. So it's going to be one of those things where we have to have the data. We set a model in place, and we use that data to inform and enhance and refine both our training and our process for how that data is getting used, as well as who's collecting that data. In reality, the call will be, we'll triage the call at the front end, but it will be law enforcement and behavioral health and maybe fire and rescue even who is actually sharing what the final disposition of that call is. Was this in fact a mental health call? Was this in fact a combination of mental health, substance abuse, or homelessness? And then what happened to that person? What happened in that case? Did we send them to Avery Road Treatment Center for a detox round? Did they go to Restoration Center once that's built? Did we have to do emergency petition, or did we have to arrest them? And was force involved at any point along the way in that process? Did they go voluntarily? Did we have to do something a little bit more involving the use of force? So all of that for me fits into how we initially establish policy and how we review it and refine it as we go forward.
And I'll add on. I do think our officers are going to be collecting a lot of this data, but there are some challenges there that, again, as we think through this, as we figure out the exact data. I mean, just to the example, we use force in so few of our interactions with our community. There's going to be a lot of things on the table that wouldn't necessarily require a report. It's just an interaction with a member of our community. And so how do we record the data that we're asking for? Is this a homeless call? As the former commander of 3D, I would tell you, the far majority of calls that come out, they don't have these indicators on mental health, on homelessness, but we do end up finding there's a significant number that do involve that. So, but then again, they end with no report. So how do we collect the data to get it to our Department of Health and Human Services and to council and to the county executive to increase our services to the public? I'm very interested in the from the Cahoots folks, because they have been in the business for a minute, of the extra training for the officers and how to qualify things. Because going back to council president's first words about how we got a bunch of officers here that just want to do the right thing. We don't want to get in the business of classifying without some guidance and making sure that we do it the right way to give really good data. And I think that's what officers are a little bit apprehensive about. First of all, asking people about their medical history, their homeless, or whether or not they're homeless. It's a difficult question. So the training on how to do that and how to collect that data once Dr. Crowell and his team tell us what data they want, that'll become very important as we implement this as well.
That's super helpful, and that does bring up, as a follow-up to this, it's, there's several stages here. It's one, establishing the correct categories of information that we want to be able to receive, determining who's going to be collecting that information, training them on how to ensure it's inputted correctly with the appropriate consultation back and forth. And I can speak in the first person about there are ongoing meetings now almost every week between law enforcement and the Department of Health and Human Services. And we received a briefing on this recently from Dr. Santiago and their team. And so again, it just illustrates why I have a high degree of confidence that this amendment makes sense. And it's not appropriate for this discussion right now because we're focusing on the call, the response to the call, and the data collection. But I do think as a follow-up, maybe sometime later this winter, I would like to discuss that back end. So as we identify these cases, provide support for the people and the families who have called in the first place, what more can we do to provide support and resources on the back end to direct them wherever it is we need to direct them? Acknowledging, as I said at the beginning, it's complicated and we have an infrastructure issue across the entire state. So that's more, I think, HHS focused, but there's undeniably a public safety element to it. So, and that will require some additional resources and support that Dr. Santiago and his team are working very diligently to establish through the crisis response teams, which are so important. But if there isn't support on the back end, then we're just going to go through this difficult cycle. For families that are in crisis for a variety of reasons. So that's more of a comment than a question, but I really do appreciate this discussion. I like how this has evolved in a pretty reasonable space here. And I appreciate those responses from both Dr. Kroll and Assistant Chief Frank.
This computer knows more than I do. It told me I was on mute. Any other comments on this amendment? If not, is there a Councilmember Rice? No, that was not a Councilmember Rice. All right, so no comment is no comment. Okay, so is this going to be by acclamation or do we need a motion on this? I think we're by acclamation. Okay, so this, Ms. Wellens, is by acclamation. So we're all the way up to we've just finished number 1. So let's go to number 2, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Number 2 concerns really the point that Councilmember Jawanda was raising about the collection of race, ethnicity, and other demographic data concerning the different types of service calls for mental health, substance abuse, and homelessness. And now we're talking about the data that is collected and maintained on the web on an ongoing basis, not solely the annual report. So you'll see before you the text of the potential amendment, and I don't want to speak for Dr. Kroll. My understanding, though, is that DHHS and certainly OLO, believe that this type of information would be very beneficial.
Dr. Kroll?
Yeah, just one observation about the data and the way this is written at this point. The identifying demographics of in a data set can be grouped, obviously, by any number of kind of different ways. There's a point at which, depending on how high the volume is and what the numbers are, where it becomes possible to identify folks, and it becomes an issue of you start to skirt the privacy issues when you start adding mental health and substance abuse to that data set. So want to encourage some moderation in this recommendation in terms of what's made public. For example, you could have an instance where data by police district matched by race, gender, age, ethnicity, and mental health status is a very low number. And it becomes possible to say, oh yeah, that was Dr. Ray. In November, he got arrested for something, or he got charged with something, or the police went out on a call because he was having some kind of mental health issue. And that would skirt some privacy issues that we need to be careful of.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I'm sorry, I don't want to.
Go ahead, no, please.
I just wanted to note that we included the language subject to state and federal law because of the very point that Dr. Cole is making. And we also have another provision that the Public Safety Committee added in a prior work session to essentially to acknowledge that if there's a situation which privacy laws preclude the publishing of this information, that the police department would simply be required to note that on the website so that the public could see why is this, why are we not seeing this data? And so if there's a privacy law reason that it can't be provided, that's fine, obviously, but then the police department would provide that explanation on the website.
Yeah, that was their safety valve on that. Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you very much. Yeah, and you made one half of my point, Ms. Wellens, so thank you for that. I'll make the other half. We know, for example, American Psychological Association, it's other places have reported half of the folks in the country in Montgomery County, because of our size and diversity, tends to mirror national statistics in a lot of ways. Over half that are incarcerated have mental health issues. We arrest, I don't know, AC Frank can protect, I think it's about 18,000 people, 20,000, I don't know, something in that range a year in the county. So I think our size and that horrible statistic about folks that are dealing with mental health that are involved in the criminal justice system is another built-in protection, I think, for privacy concerns. But it also underscores why I think it's really important to gather this information and disaggregate it and the like. So I think the language that Ms. Wellens referenced guards that, but I just wanted to bring that up as well.
It may be that I think you're right, Councilmember, given the size of the county, that it's in the aggregate, looking across the entire county, those numbers are protected. It's when you start to disaggregate it and the numbers by the police district that the numbers may get small enough for us to want to be cautious about it.
Thank you. Any other comments on this? Are we in favor of this? I'm in favor of this amendment. Are we in favor of this amendment? Because we're going to do it by acclamation. Okay, that's by acclamation. Ms. Wellens, you're on a roll. We're up to number 3, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Number 3 relates to unfounded service calls. At the last work session, the committee discussed its desire to hone in on the number of calls in the county in which the caller is essentially motivated by a racial bias or some other type of bias instead of sort of a legitimate purpose, if you will. And so obviously it is not easy necessarily to hone in on, someone's motivations, but at the same time, we know anecdotally that there are many pretty clear-cut cases of individuals calling the police on other individuals just based on their race and, when somebody's just doing a lawful activity. So it's a struggle to really get to that number. In talking with the police department, staff believes that it would be helpful to at least collect calls that are determined to be unfounded, because as I understand from Assistant Chief Frank, that information already is collected by the police department. And this won't give us a precise information on, who was motivated by bias, who was not. There can be a lot of reasons for the unfounded calls, and maybe some are just mistakes. But it can give us perhaps some useful information, at least about, where police resources are being used. I would just, And I'll defer to AC Frank if he has any additional comments on the ability to collect this information and how it would or wouldn't be useful. Thank you.
So it is a complicated metric. It has a lot to do with observations of the officers when they get on scenes, when they get to areas. I heard this word earlier, anecdotally. I know I've handled calls. I know my officers have handled calls where they weren't really sure why we were going out. Now we are the people that get called to solve problems, and when people think there's a problem. Now the reasonings behind what they put there can sometimes be questionable, especially when we get very suspicious when we get the anonymous complaints. So we've been looking at this internally, its implications on our interactions with our diverse community. It's just wrapping our head around how do we quantify this, and also not wanting to make a mistake. We have ever since 9/11, we've had the see something, say something mentality, which is very important. And certainly we have instance after instance of times when our public has come together and helped us prevent a catastrophe, prevent a tragedy. But there's also other times where people use the police as a tool when they see someone of color in their neighborhood that, I don't know, they're just not sure of. Why are they doing that? What is it that they're reporting? Something out of the normal, or something that goes more towards some sort of bias? And then, of course, when our officers get there, and if they're not anonymous, saying, why exactly did you call that in? We have good people out there that'll, just, hey, I just thought it was different, and see something, say something. That's why I called. Gathering some data will help us as far as determining policy. I know across the country, there are efforts at looking at calls like this and other items that are taking police resources, and it's a challenge, but I certainly do think it's something we need to look at.
Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Jabonda.
Thank you, Ms. Katz. I just want to enjoying visiting the Joint Committee as usual, but and always the Public Safety Committee, I have a good time. But I just on this one, I think this is a really important thing to track. There's, for a whole bunch of reasons, AC Frank, I couldn't agree with more. We're having a meta discussion about what should police spend their time doing, and how are they best effective using their resources, and how do people have constitutional, not only policing, but that we reduce bias in instances of hate and discrimination in our community writ large. And this is an issue that is connected to all of those things, and having the data is kind of like a baseline. There's some jurisdictions, and I've looked into this with Councilmember Reamer and some others about that have made a civil right of action if you can prove that someone called the police based on race, ethnicity, gender, or some protected class. And several jurisdictions and states have passed that. We know that, unfortunately, that police have been weaponized, particularly against people of color, against Black people, and we have a lot of examples of that. And you just heard that spoken to. So I think this is something we definitely want to track. And I would also, and we've had an example here. I mean, I've had people call me about people swimming in a pool in Bethesda and getting police called on them, or, go down the list. But, and then swatting in general of just using, prank calls, security services. We want to know that regardless of what it's connected to. So the question I would have, so I want to speak in favor of it, but also ask a question of maybe it's AC Frank. When the call comes in, we're tracking, if someone says to the 911 dispatcher, there's a Black person in my neighborhood who looks suspicious, we're tracking all of that, and the officer is going to the scene with that information, correct?
Correct. Yes. They'll give a description, and the officers will be given that information. And I will tell you, and this is a credit to our officers and our supervisors out there, that I have heard a lot more because we have an obligation to respond, right? Someone calls 911 and says, go check this out. I will say our officers and supervisors have been applying common sense, and they've been asking back, what is it that they're doing that's actually illegal? And we will cancel out calls that way. It's a tough call. It's a discretionary call, but yes, we have that data, and we can pull that out of our system.
All right. And when you say they ask, what are they doing? That's a question to the dispatcher who's on the line, or to get more information, right? That's what you mean? That's who they're asking.
Right. And again, it's a difficult situation for us, right? We get called to help. We get called to serve.
Sure.
And to tell a community member that, thanks for calling, but we're not coming for that. That's a tough thing for us, right? We signed up, both our professional staff at the communication center and our officers. We want to serve.
Sure.
So finding that balance, but yes, in light of everything that's going on, and actually I will tell you, this started before George Floyd, because we got a lot of young officers that are really just great minds about them. And they're saying, why am I going to talk to this person? They're just in a neighborhood. You haven't told me they've done something criminal. So that continues to be a work in process.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think that's why it has to be a holistic solution. The right incentive or stick for the resident to know that, hey, if you do this, it's going to be a problem. And we're not talking about that here today, but if there's some sort of civil penalty, but you guys having the right set of direction and policies, and then having the data of what's happening. So this is an important component. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I support this wholeheartedly.
Thank you. Councilmember Glass.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the questions that Councilmember Juando just asked, and I too have been looking into this issue, separate from the conversation that we're having today, because residents have come to me having stated that cops were called on them for unfounded reasons. And I know I want to stick to the relevance to this conversation and not take it elsewhere, which we could very easily do. But I'll also share that I've had individuals who were working for me in a campaign capacity, who were Black men who had municipal police officers called on them because they were going up to doors, just door knocking. And so this happens here in Montgomery County, and it happens in some of our more progressive communities as well. And one of the questions I have is trying to figure out what happens currently. Assistant Chief Frank, what happens when a call is made and it is determined to be unfounded, right? Either dismissed, as you just said, because you're screening them a little bit more, or an officer or teams go out and realize nothing, there was nothing there. What happens?
Well, it depends on a number of things. The citizen calling in has an option between being on the record, but not wanting to be seen, or being anonymous. So a lot of it's a computer file. It's a result that we have captured in our system. Our officers will go out. They'll make they'll either find someone fitting a description and talk with them real quick, or they won't find anyone. When they talk with them, they just have a normal contact. Hey, what's up? Sometimes there's notes in the file, sometimes there's not. But it doesn't. Go ahead.
The notes in the file, is that on the resident, the person who called, and know if they're a frequent flyer, so to speak, in this regard, someone calling in with?
It can be if it's coming from the same address, you'll have that history, or you can search by name too. So you can search by name or address. Actually, you can search by a whole bunch of functions. But yeah, there would be notes in the notes section on what was found.
Okay, I appreciate that, and glad that there are notes keeping track should any additional action be required. But I think that these types of unfounded calls really fit into three different categories, and there's the unconscious bias, where someone might not be fully aware of the bigotry or racist thoughts that might be permeating within. There is clearly conscious bias where it's outright discrimination in some regard. And then, as we've seen, in Central Park and in other locations, it's quite frankly retaliatory action, which clearly is conscious, but there's another step there too. And so I know we're not trying to get into the minds of people, and that takes us in a whole different avenue here, legally, quite frankly. But just wanted to share that as we continue this conversation, right? And I support this amendment, but I think it's something that we need to dive into a little bit further. And again, glad that Councilmember Jawando said that he and others are talking about this, because I have been looking into it myself, so we can continue this conversation. But I think it is a really important one, and the fact that there are notes and files, I think, is extremely important, so that we know who those frequent callers are, so that if future action is taken or needed, that we have that on record. But back to the point here, for the here and now, I support this amendment, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
And council member, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Yes, sir. I just want to clarify too. We have a lot of good citizens that are being observational and calling in things that they need to be calling in. So that's what makes this very difficult. There are some things that, going to Councilmember Glass's point, that we don't want to have in our system, right? But there are some things that they call in, and to be honest, there's also some other things that the citizenry of our county are kind of at a crossroads with. I can tell you, we get a lot of calls for smoking marijuana, that becomes a challenge upon our officers, because we're put into the middle of this local and national discussion to go take a police action on something. So very, very complex with these calls. So, but I appreciate everyone's.
No. And you're absolutely right, which is why, I'll speak for myself, having many a different conversation, doing my due diligence, recognizing the complexities, and not wanting people to not report crime that is actually occurring, right? And that's the balance that we're trying to figure out, which is why the unconscious, conscious, and retaliatory, all those are important to the conversation. But at the end of the day, we want police trying to stop real crime in action. And how do we strike that balance is the reason why I've been having other conversations, and I presume others are as well. So thank you for that context and perspective. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, President Hucker.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, well, a lot of this has been said, but I'm very supportive of this amendment. I, like Councilmember Glass, I definitely have had this experience quite a bit during election campaigns, but also in my old jobs running door-to-door canvases back in the 1990s. Used to have to hire and train hundreds of staff, DC area and other cities around the country, to go door-to-door signing up members. And many were white, many were black. And we got a lot of police calls, and hardly ever on the white staff. And before we would send any canvassers to any incorporated city or town, you'd have to call the city clerk and police chief and notify them on the front end, and often share Supreme Court cases to show them that we have the constitutional right to do this if they have an anti-solicitation ordinance or something in place, and get a letter on letterhead to show to residents. And police chiefs, to the chief's point, would often claim that they just had to send somebody out every time they get a call from a resident that there's a black person walking through their neighborhood, God forbid. And, I spent a lot of time on the phone with lots of police chiefs saying, well, okay, why do you have to? I mean, you can ask the questions. Are they breaking into a house? Are they peeping in the windows? If they are, I want to know, and I'm going to fire them tonight. But if they're not, if they're going door to door, talking to people about a public issue, they have the right to do that. And you don't have the need, you don't have to send somebody to slow them down and intimidate, potentially intimidate them or have some impact on their night. So I just want to say this has been going on for a long time, and it's not a Montgomery County issue. We got a lot fewer calls in Montgomery County and DC than in Northern Virginia and many other places. But I think the regulation and the script is really important following this amendment and the passage of the law, because to the chief's point, yeah, I'm really glad to know we're training people, officers, to say what exactly are they doing. Certain things are permitted, certain things are not. If they're doing something that's permitted, why did you call? What do you think is exactly suspicious or dangerous that led you to call? So I think we'll have to follow up. I'm very supportive of the amendment.
Thank you very much. Vice President Albornoz.
Thanks. I definitely support the amendment too, but this is, I think so for context, when Safe Silver Spring was really actively up and running, and there was some really intense and I thought productive community discourse and conversation with homeowners associations, civic associations, that type of collaboration and that type of trust and that type of relationship building was very important for issues exactly like the one we're talking about right now. There is a practical reality that the fastest growing demographic we have in Montgomery County is our aging population, who we are encouraging to live in place and providing support for them to be able to do so, which means that we want to, and who are especially feel vulnerable at times. So that's why tracking this information is so important, because this is also helpful, as with the entire bill, for us to be able to more productively and efficiently establish an infrastructure that is more equitable. And I appreciated Assistant Chief Frank's comment that as part of, hopefully part of training, but more formal, less organic, that we are ensuring that the reasonable questions are being asked on the front end, both to ensure equity and that we're not disproportionately impacting folks and further contributing to this cycle of really just the inequities that occur, but also that we can educate sort of on both sides. And so I think this is a good opportunity for us to be able to advance, but yet another example of why we need better community policing models and infrastructures in place to be able to have these conversations on the front end. So that I think is also a critic, because this is only part of the discussion. And if we're really going to get to the heart of this, we got to start figuring out on the programmatic end and the operational end how we do that too. And, because it also prevents an officer from wasting his or her time and responding to a call that they shouldn't be responding to in the first place, taking them out and not being able to respond to a more serious call. So I think that's another benefit to ensuring the equitable access here. So, but I see you're about to say something, Assistant Chief Frank. Would love to hear your comments.
Oh, I just want to clarify, so as part of reimagining, as part of the audit and all the things that are going on regarding looking at our police department, looking at these calls is one of those things we're looking at policy-wise. Chief Jones will have to make some decisions, and we're exploring information right now, exploring the very data that we're talking about, and looking at, can we change, and I'm also working with Cass Onley, who leads our communication center. Can we better screen these calls? Can we eliminate these from the queue? Do we need to change our policy on, say, anonymous calls of nondescript behavior, suspicious behavior? So we don't have a formal policy in place. What I was speaking to earlier is essentially a grassroots by our officers that don't want to be weaponized, that don't want to be a part of these other things, making decisions on the road, which is the kind of decisions we want them to make as thoughtful police officers. Should I really be going to this? Now, I did want to add, there is one, there's a huge liability challenge here, right? The citizen could call something in, they're very shy, they want to be anonymous, and they're reporting a behavior and they don't exactly describe it. And then that ends up to be one of these tragedies, right? Where this person breaks into a house and does, something unspeakable. That's the other thing that kind of keeps us awake at night as we're trying to find this balance. Do we miss one of those opportunities to prevent a tragedy? So it really weighs on us as we're trying to make these decisions on policy and what the exact balance is. And really, it's going to be an effort between all of us. the citizens, the police department, the council on deciding, where we want to draw the line.
Mhm. Yeah, and this is a productive conversation because we're having the conversation. We're trying to figure this out, and I think this is really helpful and another important step in us moving in the right direction. So I appreciate those comments. But I yield back to you, Mr. Chairman. I do support this amendment.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to call on Councilmember Rice in 2 seconds. But Chief Frank, in the incident that President Hucker was talking about, if somebody calls in, and they've checked on a person for, obviously it was that they were doing something legitimate and they had every right to do it, could the call taker say, now we've received, other complaints in your neighborhood and we have checked on that person or people and that this is a legitimate issue? Is this something beyond that? Or you know what I'm asking?
So our beat officers and our supervisors do a really nice job of paying attention to what's going on around them. So if it doesn't get caught by our communications folks, it generally gets caught, like repeat calls. It'll get caught by our supervisors and our beat officers who really take pride in beat integrity, knowing their neighborhoods, knowing the people in their community, and answering those calls. So it'll usually get caught there. It's rare that I hear that we deal with the same person 3 and 4 times, just blindly going to calls. If that helps, sir.
Yeah, I'm going to call on Craig, but President Hucker, is that a follow-up for this one?
Just a quick follow-up on this. No, thanks, Chief. You're making me remember Robert White here in my neighborhood. And, he was well known for going on walks, as most of us do at different times. And he walked around every day, and people in the neighborhood knew him, and a beat officer, I think, would know him. But unfortunately, the officer involved in that incident was not a beat officer in that neighborhood, was called in for a different call, didn't know him, had to follow up quickly and make decisions quickly. Is there an opportunity for an officer responding to a call like that in an unfamiliar neighborhood, pursuing somebody who, at the time they were called in, wasn't breaking into a house or anything, was literally just walking through the neighborhood and walking away from the officer, which people might do for other legitimate reasons? Is there an opportunity for an officer responding to a call like that to get in touch with a beat officer or somebody else that is going to be familiar with the neighborhood and the individual? I realize it was like a developing situation, but I think the tragedy that happened there happened because, to your point, the officer wasn't a beat officer, wasn't familiar with him, Mr. White.
Right, and so that case in particular, there's a lot of complex issues around there because we also had, at the time, we had issues with daytime burglaries and all kinds of other things that go into the service mode of an officer and wanting to protect their community. There could be an opportunity to get a hold of, but then again, it's only as good as the description you get. If you get a description for a black male looking suspiciously wearing a black jacket, it's not the same as giving the exact description of Mr. White that someone would recognize automatically in a very dense, the apartment community, a very dense population there, that someone could pick that out immediately. Really, you pick that out once you get on scene and you say, oh, there was a couple, when I was a beat officer, there was a number of people we get calls all the time for. And you could guess who I was going to deal with. Yeah. But until you got there and saw him, that's Paris. Okay. I knew this.
I could see, especially you're responding to somebody who's walking away from you from the back or whatever, but, and that's, I'm probably raising something that's sort of too high a standard, but it still begs the question, why follow him in the first place if he's not doing anything? So just to use your language, what constitutes suspicious behavior in that scenario?
In which
he wasn't breaking into houses, he wasn't looking in windows, he wasn't doing anything like that. He was literally walking down the street on a walk and then walked away from an officer who said, hey, stop. But I don't know that the officer had probable cause to stop him.
Well, the officer was trying to engage with him, and then unfortunately, a whole situation came out of that. Again, there were a number of other issues at play, and I don't think we want to get into all the issues at play right here. But again, as you go into these situations, making sure that our officers have the best policies to back them up and make sure they have the best, what does the public expect of them? Again, there was reasons why the individual was engaged with, and knowing the expectations of our citizens is very important, and certainly there's a lot of lessons to be learned in that tragic event.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Jawando. Councilmember Rice is next. You promised it was going to be a quick comment, so we're going to hold you to that. No, you're on mute.
Go to Councilmember Rice, please.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Very much. Councilmember Rice, please. Thank you, Councilmember Jawando.
So very quickly, I do agree with the amendment. I do also agree that it's going to be challenging to be able to discern from that the information that we're trying to achieve. I understand completely where Councilmember Jawando is coming from in terms of what he said about what it is that we want to find out. I mean, we know that these calls exist, right? We've heard it from all of our colleagues so far, that there are calls where, for whatever discriminatory reason, people have judgments and biases, and so they call and make those kinds of things. But if the objective is to make sure that we're not responding to a call, I think that that's going to be harder. I think what I heard from AC Frank is that once they get on the scene, if the officers know, and it goes more to Council President Hucker's point, if the officer then gets to the scene and then realizes, hey, this is the case, that's really what our true objective is, because we're not going to know up front, right? I mean, it could be a new neighbor who just moved in, who has no idea about, that this person normally walks the neighborhood every week, and they're going to call and say, look, this person's acting suspiciously because they just keep walking around and in between cars, and they're going to call. And it might not even be a biased situation. It may just be that they're just being, noticing of something that they deem as, suspicious, right? And that's in the judgment of the beholder. And I'm not defending it, but I'm just saying in those kind of instances, we want the officer who responds to be one who can elevate themselves above that bias and be able to discern, as you heard from Council President Hucker, that, hey, this is a person who is not a threat, who's not doing whatever, and move on to the next. Now, is the data going to be helpful in that sense? Well, I think that if there are the frequent callers, the frequent flyers who continue to call, we can then have a relationship between the police department and those particulars to say, hey, look, you've called a number of times. This is what. So I do believe, and that's why I support the amendment, I do believe the data is important from that perspective. Do I think it will stop the actual service calls from happening for the most part? Probably not, until we get to the point of reaching some of those people who may be the frequent flyers, frequent callers. So that may help. So that's why I support it, because I think that overall, in the overarching sense, we may get to some of those individuals who we know are more just calling just to try and intimidate, or to, because there's an issue with a neighbor, or whatever the case may be. So I completely support that. But I think that there's a greater issue that's here that was highlighted by Council President Hucker, that really is that concept of community policing and understanding what it means when you're responding, and to be able to have that data, right? If possible, right? To have that as you respond, and then say, oh, I have this data that, I received 15 calls over the course of the last year about a gentleman walking through the neighborhood, walking in between cars. Maybe this is the same guy. And they go in with that data, and then it helps them, right? So I think that there's possibilities for it to work on both sides, but I just wanted to acknowledge that, in a lot of cases, it won't stop those calls from coming in, especially the one-offs that are discriminatory. But at the same time, it will certainly help to make sure that our officers are more informed, and to make sure that those who are repeatedly being discriminatory will actually be able to be addressed as well.
Thank you, Councilmember Jawando.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Just quickly, I think great discussion underscores the point why the dispatch is so important. And we have to have the right scripts there. We have to have the right set of questions. Our crisis now model, I saw Dr. Kroll's here, I saw Dr. Santiago. That is, if we keep coming back, that initial point of entry is so important of asking the right questions, having the right conversation, so the decision can be made and the policy can be set. And I appreciate to hear from AC Frank that you're having those discussions, and we should be involved in helping, as long as the county executive, giving guidance and on what we think that should be from a policy perspective, because I do think there does need to be a policy set and shift based on getting the right information in, and then making a determination based on what you glean from that information, right? Which you're already doing in some ways, but it's good to hear that you're analyzing it further and having more discussion about it, because I do think there are a set of calls as we're having the larger conversation: homelessness, mental health, profiling, swatting, that could be eliminated and moved off your ledger if we have the right questions asked and get the right answers. And I don't want us. And I think we need to pursue that vigorously, because we know how disparate the data is. And while there's always a what if, right? We're never going to be perfect. The person I don't know on the street could do something to me when I walk out the building, but I have no reason to know that or to any information to suggest that. And so that's why I think we have to be guided by the right set of questions and best practices and data to make the best informed decisions to minimize the discrimination. So I think I just wanted to say that I think this is a small part of that in understanding what's happening, but then we need to have these continued other conversations to what our policies are and should be. And then also what Councilmember Glass and I were talking about at the beginning of, what should there be a stick on the side of the resident if they are doing it, if they are a frequent flyer who does this a lot, we should have a way to discourage that as well. So, I'm glad we're having it, and just wanted to, kind of say that in conclusion.
Thank you. I am hearing that this should be by acclamation unless I hear from somebody that disagrees with that. So this is by acclamation as well. And Ms. Wellens, we are now up to number 4, please. The last, I think, except for the next step. But anyway, please.
Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Yes, this is issue number 4, which is the final outstanding issue for the committee's consideration. And this relates to trespass enforcement. And the committee had a previous conversation about the general issue of trespass enforcement, and in fact already adopted an amendment to require demographic information to be collected related and published online related to the issuance of stay away orders. And that amendment also requires the police department to post information about the location, not only the demographic information about the individuals, but the location of where the stay away order was issued. This final consideration is, subsequent to that, some advocate organizations, individuals reiterated their request that they are hoping that the police will post online copies of all of the agreements that the department has in place with individual property owners related to trespass enforcement at their properties, and agreements that authorize the police to act as agents of the property owners in certain circumstances. So, with the chair's permission, I know that Assistant Chief Frank was going to look into this question a bit more. So you may want to hear from him on whether to adopt this amendment, and then the potential amendment is to require the posting of those agreements online.
Please, and we're going to ask the Assistant Chief. Chief, so I would assume, and this could be wrong, but I would assume that pretty much any agreement would be the same agreement with any property owner. There wouldn't be anything that's customized, right?
No, there's nothing that's customized. The only sense of that would be like operating hours. We have changed up our agent letters with businesses to be much more restrictive, and really have to do with hours when a business representative might not be there and someone be on their property. This has become really important in areas like downtown Silver Spring, where they're not open 24/7, and there are people that are clearly trespassing that need to be dealt with. for the interest of all parties. And generally that includes, that's mainly, hey, it's time to go. You're not allowed to be here. And so yes, that's the only, but that's not built into the form. Everything's within a certain set policy.
Councilmember Jwanda.
Thank you. Appreciate that question to Chairman Katz. I had a similar one. Good to hear, AC Frank, that those forms have been updated. I think this was if there were one issue that was the predecessor to this whole report that I request from OLO in the bill, it was this trespass issue. So I think it's appropriate that we're kind of wrapping up talking about it. I had requested several years ago when we had the issue at White Oak McDonald's, a list of all the trespass entities, businesses that had trespass orders in the county. And I did receive that. It was a long list. And I would assume that, and it was just to your point, just a list of the name of the business, because they were all the same form, and you just confirmed that they still are the same form. And you just might have, you've closed it into the hours of where there's non-activity. Am I restating that correctly?
There's a couple additional changes in there, and I, without having it in front of me, I can't, the old and the new. What I can say is that we had a work group that went through this whole issue, and we debated the usefulness of this ability, and came out on the end, in the interest of public safety, it made sense to have this tool, but we really needed to update our policy on it and make it more restrictive. So that, for example, when McDonald's is open for business, if they chose to have it, that a manager or business rep would have to initiate that trespass rather than an officer just acting off of that trespass letter. They were doing it with the best, and generally they do it with the best of intentions. It's just, in all fairness, if you're a business rep and you're there and there's someone there that you don't want in your business, you should be able to articulate that to an officer and have them take action. So getting rid of that type of action, we felt was very, very prudent going forward.
I appreciate it. Yeah, thank you. And that was a situation at White Oak McDonald's where it was during business office hours. The officer had not been called, but he used the authority. So that would not happen going forward. That's good to know. The other thing I just wanted to ask on this: are you all currently, while this bill requires it, I'm hoping that we're already have changed the forms and are already collecting race and ethnicity, which was not on previous trespass forms. Is that now on the new form, to your knowledge?
I want to say it should be.
Okay. You can get back to me.
Unfortunately, it's been I can get back to you. It's been a couple of years since I filled out one of those, but it almost has to be. It's an identifying feature. Yeah. I mean, the reality is, because we have to be able to go back and say, all right, is this Joe Smith? Who's 5'7", but let me check into that and get back.
Yeah, actually, I've seen the old form. It wasn't on there for some reason. It wasn't on the old form. And
we used to have Polaroids, which is interesting, because we used to attach Polaroids and have beat books with that, and that might be why. And that also goes with our general policy of not asking of anyone race or ethnicity, which what we're engaged with right now. We're changing that a good deal, but let me get back to you on that, Councilman.
Okay. And the other thing, while you're doing it, just if they're digitized, I'm assuming, because I know they used to be held in the individual station on the kind of tri-copy by themselves. I'm assuming we've moved past that. So, and that'll obviously help us collect all this data, but that's really important too. Okay. All right. Well, thank you. And I appreciate that, and appreciate this amendment. I think it's really important. And folks should know where these exist and just govern themselves accordingly. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I am not seeing any other committee members that wanted to speak on this topic, so I'm assuming this can be by acclamation as well, this amendment. And it looks like it can be. And with that, Ms. Wellens, we can, I guess it would be by joint committee, though. Yes, Chief Frank.
I've got a great executive officer who's on it. Just going back to Councilmember Juando, that information is on the form and it is digitized. I'm actually look at that technology. I'm actually looking at it right now. So
thank you.
Yep.
And thank the executive officer as well, please.
Good job, Jordan.
Yeah. So with that, Ms. Wellens, I would assume that this would be a recommendation by the joint committee to the council that we go forward with 4520. Is it okay to do it as a joint committee, or do we have to do it as public safety and the joint committee? How does that work?
I think it's really up to the chairs and the committees how they want to proceed. My understanding was that the Public Safety Committee was getting the input of HHS Committee on those particular issues that were issues 1 and 2 of today related to substance abuse, mental health, and homelessness calls. And then the Public Safety Committee would go on to make the recommendation. But you could do it either way, up to how the chairs want to proceed. But of course, HHS didn't have the benefit of the prior work sessions.
Vice President Albernaz, what is your suggestion on this one?
Let me give this a shot, Christine, and let me know if this is in bounds. I'd like to move that the Public Safety Committee move forward the bill as amended with consultation with the HHS Committee on items 1 and 2 discussed today.
Would anyone like to second that, please? Council President Hucker, would you like to second that? Yeah, okay. So it's been moved, and that was very King Solomon-like, Mr. Vice President. It has been moved and seconded that we move forward with 4520. That all those in favor, with the consultation of the Health and Human Services Committee, all those in favor, please raise your hand. And that's all on the Public Safety Committee. And we're going to get some additional help from HHS. Thank you very, very much. This was most helpful today. And Ms. Wellens, you deserve a gold star as well for this. You got it as Chief Frank and everyone else to get us to today. And as I say, we started out by saying this was going to be a bill that we wanted to be, that it would be more transparent, and that the public would certainly be involved in every step of the way as best we all could. But we wanted to be very careful how we did it, and we did. So thank you very much. Unless there's any other discussion on this, we're
Mr.
going
Chairman.
to be adjourned.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Councilmember Duando. Yes.
Just say thank you to Dr. Elaine Bonner Tompkins and Natalia
Yes.
Sosa,
Yes.
who were very, very integral in the report and the whole bill.
And thank you for reminding me of that. I should have done that as well. So thank everyone who worked on this, but we appreciate it. With that, we are going to be adjourned. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.